A little bit, yeah.
That's some sunshine. Carson, is it still snowing in Genesee?
It never stops.
We'll just wait about 1 more minute. There's still people signing on.
So if you haven't tried.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Morning.
Anita. All right, looks like we're at 38. I know there's usually a couple more, but we'll go ahead and get started because we got quite a few items on the agenda. So good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. I want to say a quick happy late birthday to Karen Stewart. I didn't tell you I was going to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
And then just some brief comments about our retreat that we had last week. So there were quite a few people in attendance. Thank you, everyone. We had 31 people at the retreat. And the mission statement and shared value statement are going to be revised to reflect the great, we had a really great discussion actually about just some of the language to add in with inclusion and diversity. So we'll add in that. Staff will work on that and get back to us. And then we did have another discussion about the gap analysis, which we started talking about last year, but never got to do just because of COVID. And so I think that we agreed that that really is something that we want to see done just to see what the needs are in our area. Even if everything was fully built out, we know there's still gaps. So that'll be really interesting and valuable information. And then staff will provide the minutes from that meeting and get out to everyone sometime soon. Is there anything else with that, Karen?
I think you got it all. I was pretty encouraged at the amount of participation we had and the interesting discussions about who we are and who do we want to be, and are we serving everybody that are members. I thought it was a very good discussion, and thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you. All right, with that, let's go ahead and move on to the approval of the March 25th meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved, Malcolm.
Second.
Thank you, Malcolm. Second by Deb. Any opposed or changes? I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and move those forward. And we'll move into the treasurer's quarterly report.
So I'm not sure if, Karen, you'd like me to just take this over. We can just kind
Yes,
of.
please.
Absolutely. So as you all know, this is my first time giving the treasurer's report. As you can see, there was a carryover balance of a little under 18,000. There was membership dues. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, every single locality paid, which was wonderful. You guys are all so good. So I don't know if it's because I'm intimidating as the new treasurer, but thank you. So that led us to total operating income at just a little over 43,000. The expenses, the approved expenses, was NATA administration at 23,400. Our smart commute membership dues at 12,500, leaving us a balance in our operating cash at $9,405.54.
Thank you, Anita. Any questions about the treasurer's report? Good job.
Thanks.
All
We
right,
should
I
probably
don't-
have a motion to accept.
Perfect. Anybody have questions? No questions? I don't see hands and I'm scrolling. So if you have any questions, give me a second.
It
I don't
appears
see
there's a
any waving
question
hands.
from Rebecca Rathburn of CDOT.
I think she's just
I
typing
think
in
she's
that
just
here.
signing in. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, I don't see any waving hands. So can we get a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved. Malcolm.
Second, Elizabeth Law Evans.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Elizabeth. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll go ahead and accept the treasurer's report. Okay, moving on to the smart commute update.
Thanks. I'll start this and then hand it over to other staff members. Wanted to tell you about our grants pursuits update. And I think I told you last time that we did receive the Can Do Colorado e-bikes grant, which is pretty exciting and is part of a companion to our Flex Ride program. In that Flex Ride grant, we call out shuttle service from RTD, but also multimodal options as they become available. And we did pursue an e-bikes that's a loan to own for people who live in the vicinity of our NATA area within 10 miles of 144th and I-25 for that four corners of workforce at St. Anthony North and Amazon and the Orchard and the area over by Cabela's.
Look, honey. Look how
pretty-
cute you look.
That wasn't me. And we're pretty excited about that. We think we'll be able to get 30 bikes in the first round of this. And so we're very appreciative to the Colorado Energy Office for approving that grant. The other grant that we have gone after and we have approval on, and we are negotiating, we're negotiating on the e-bikes contract. We'll be looking at this new grant, which is a telework grant from Can Do Colorado. And it is the creation of 3 instructional videos to improve teleworking in the arena of well-being. And one of the videos is an ergonomic instruction video. One of them is a physical well-being, and the third one is a mental well-being. And we are engaging a professional physical therapist to help us create those videos. We're partnering with Broomfield Chamber, and we'll have the Broomfield Chamber members test that videos and help us tweak those a little bit before we finalize them. And then they'll be available to everybody at NATA and beyond to use those. We think there's a lot of telework information out there, but not so much about the telework fatigue that people are having and some of the physical symptoms of being in front of your computer all day and not walking away. So excited to have that. And now I'm going to turn it over to, I think it might be Carson who's going to do
And it
the.
looks like we actually have a question, Karen,
Oh,
from
okay.
Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
hi Karen.
Hi.
I as a longtime e-bike aficionado, I'm on my second. I got a lovely new Trek e-bike a year ago, and I ride mine around Broomfield doing errands and going to meetings, and well, when we have meetings. But in the grant, will there be is there a place for educating people on how to care for and honestly how to store and lock the bikes? Because too many times I see bikes in my neighborhood or wherever that people, God forbid, it never happens in this house, people store outside and they deteriorate very quickly. And an expensive e-bike that you know, a couple $1,000 e-bike, this grant could go to waste very quickly if people don't have instruction as to how to properly care for them. So I don't know, that's just a thought. You just touched a chord there in me with that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Elizabeth, and I should say council member. And the grant is really well done in that we have to partner with the Colorado Energy Office, NREL, who puts together an app for us that tracks the usage of the bike, and the contractor who's purchasing the bikes from, and that's Infill bikes. And there will be instructions to each of the participants, and the program explains all of that, how to remove the battery, how to get on transit with a bike. And I'm happy to bring all this back to you guys next month to give you a bigger view of it. We're still just negotiating everything before we sign the contract, but separately, I'll just send you that contract, Elizabeth, so you can look
Sure.
at it and give me any input that maybe we've missed something. We're the second iteration of these bike grants, and I think the Northeast Transportation Connections were the pilot and worked through a lot of those kinds of things that probably we aren't as knowledgeable about, but bike users would be knowledgeable about. But I'd love to have your input. So
I would be honored to look at that. It's a blast. I'll just tell you that it is so much fun. So if anybody wants to go for a ride or wants to give mine a test ride, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to meet you somewhere.
Oh, that sounds great. Thanks so much. So Carson,
Do you want me to talk about Bike to Summer? Is that correct?
yes, would you mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as you all know, we talked about it last month, are kicking off our campaign. We actually kicked it off yesterday, called Bike to Summer. And we've been promoting.
Yesterday? You
kicked
kicked it off yesterday?
We did. We kicked it off with
The
an
snow.
email. It was wonderful with the snow. We did not get on a bike, but virtually, you know. So we're excited about this program, and we're going to have monthly themes throughout the summer, May through September, culminating in Bike to Work Day at the end of the year. And I guess what I'd like to share with you today is in May, we're going to partner with the city of Northglenn for their full moon bike ride that their HEAL committee is putting on. And then we're going to partner with every jurisdiction, as many as we can throughout the summer, on different bike friendly events as we go through each month. And the themes will be like, I bike alone, I bike with friends, I bike with family, those kinds of things, so that we can capture different groups throughout the summer. And we would ask that if you have any thoughts about theme ideas, or if you know of any events that are taking place in your jurisdictions, that you would reach out to me so that we can try to partner and co-promote those events, and then have Smart Commute come out and staff a table and promote some of the biking options, excuse me, in the area. Yeah, I think that's the only update I have, other than just thanks for your support on this.
And we have quite a bit of swag. We didn't do any community outreach last year. So we have garnered quite a bit of swag. And so if you have events that you'd like us to attend and bring some giveaways, we're your folks. So I think the other thing I wanted to mention was something we've been working on for a while with RTD is the Flex Ride service. Typically Flex Rides, we used to be call-in rides. We used to have a Monday through Friday service. And when we did the Flex Ride up at 144th, because it's workforce, we managed to get it Monday through Saturday. And we've been working for a year to try and add Sunday service. And we're happy to announce that the RTD board approved June service changes that include Sunday service for the Flex Ride. And that means a lot to people who do shift work. For example, Amazon and the Orchard Town Center, St. Anthony North Health Campus, and the restaurants and employees over at the Cabela's area and the Denver Premium Outlets, because those businesses run outside of the norm of commuting times and also 7 days a week. So we're very appreciative and very excited about that. And it's been behind the scenes effort for a whole year now. So wanted to say that. And then before I let you go from Smart Commute, I'll just ask Tammy, was there anything else that I've missed or Carson has that we should update on Smart Commute, Tammy?
I can't think of anything. We've just been really going gangbusters on the Bike to Work Day and trying to promote that through e-blast and social media. And we're going to be pushing out a lot of stuff on social media. So if you guys don't follow us, follow us. So we'd really appreciate it if you would repost that or retweet that for us.
Well, thanks. That's what we have, Chair.
Thank you. That was a good report. I'm glad that we're getting back to some normalcy with Bike to Work Day again. Okay, NATA priority project list updates. I know we didn't have too many the last time, but maybe there's a couple more now.
So we thought we'd tell you, remind you of the process. The process is that we have a list of 3 lists. We have the project priority list. We have an endorsed list, and we have a horizon list, and you can make changes to any of those. The changes are to be made with the approval of the NATA reps. And so we've asked that at the beginning of each of these time periods, February, May, and August, that any changes to the list or any additions, any edits, that you contact us at Smart Commute or through NATA website, and we'll bring them to the board in at the beginning of May, which is just past next week. We entertain any additions or edits for the board meeting in May, when we'll take formal action. And Westminster is the only community that has given us any changes. So Carson, I think we have those here. All right. So you can see.
Karen, would you like me to talk about the project? It's
That
Deborah.
would be perfect. So Deborah Basket from Westminster provided us this request, and I'll turn it over to Deborah.
Great, thank you. So Westminster continues to do a scan of our missing links and bottlenecks, and in this case, a road that is functionally obsolete. So many of you may occasionally or normally use the Federal Parkway, which is the road that connects 120th at Federal to 128th. We built that with help from the state, just really minimally, 1 lane in each direction, no bike lanes, and there's a pinch point at a bridge.
Oh.
So what we would like to do is, we only have enough money to adjust the segment between 120th and 122nd, which is where the little business plaza is there. But in the long term, to complete improvements, multimodal improvements, that all the way to 128th/Zunai. So we're excited to be able to add bike lanes by doing this, and also the regional Dry Creek Trail is right there, and it's cumbersome now for people to figure out how to get to the trail. And then the Dry Creek Trail also has an underpass under Federal Boulevard and continues connecting to the regional network. So Broomfield's on one side of that road and Westminster's on the other side. It's in Adams County. So we are excited to put that on the NATA radar screen. Hope you will support that project and our priority list. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions? I don't see
I
any.
think we have a couple of additions that Britt gave us that are edits. So Carson, do you have that? Yeah. Deborah, do you want to speak to these?
Well, I can speak to the first one, and I'm hoping my colleague Sarah Grant or someone from Broomfield is on for the other ones as I scan quickly. So what we suggested when we say proposed edits, we've got we've got, as you see, are wonderful. We have funding for some of the projects that have been on our priority list, and we thought it was important to remind the group, hey, we have been successful, yay. So the Sheridan Boulevard project that I have a nexus to is the multimodal underpass right at the Sheridan BRT station to downtown Westminster. And that was one of the locations along the US 36 bikeway that did not have a grade separation. So bikes would come screaming up to the end of the bikeway at Sheridan and have to cross, I think it's like 8 lanes of traffic to connect to the other side. They have to cross to one side of the street and then cross over Sheridan. So we're very excited that project is underway. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
thought I saw Sarah on here. There she is.
Oh, there
Hi.
she is.
Thanks, Deborah.
You're welcome.
144th Avenue and Dillon Road is well on its way, and we expect it to be open in the next couple of months here, hopefully by June. So we're very excited about that project. So we can feel confident in removing that one. Colorado 7, as some of the NATA members here are also involved in the Colorado 7 project. We have a preliminary environmental engineering project going on right now between Brighton and Boulder, and we've identified some proposed actions to start moving forward some key projects, intersections, and segments in that project. And I'm sorry, Deborah, you may have to help me out here with US 287. Is this the east-west connection, 120th Avenue? You're on mute.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's referring to. I'm sorry. So Karen, we can follow up with you to figure out what the vestigial terminology. It's always confusing because the state highways have different names. So we'll figure it out for you. But the good news is it says it's to have been completed. So it is probably the 120th Avenue connection.
Thank you.
That sounds great. So these will come in front of us. We'll make those changes and send out the list again. Carson, you had mentioned that you're willing to work with staff, so you might just mention what you said to me.
Sure. I just want to say I'm more than willing to go through the project list with you, Deborah, and others. That if we want to go through it in live time and edit it together on a Zoom link, I'm more than happy to do that if that's easier.
Yeah, I think offline would be much more productive than taking the time of the committee. But I do want to remind everyone on the call that this list helps us. Karen put it talked about it at the retreat. It gives us much more nimbleness to support projects that are already on our list should they be considered for funding through any opportunities. So I do encourage staff to work with their electeds to look at what you're teeing up. We have a new tip cycle coming up. I mean, it's fascinating that there's bits and pieces of CDOT funding that are coming to the DRCOG region. So it really would be great if our priority list is reflective of what people are hoping to do. So staff can work online with Carson to bring you another list when we revisit this in the next quarter.
And to just reiterate what Deborah said about the retreat, one of the reasons we put this list together is so that if there is a funding opportunity and someone needs a letter from NATA, we don't have to come back to NATA and ask you for permission to do that. If it's on the priority project list, the chair is authorized to write a letter of support on behalf of NATA. And that's really important. On the 270 build grant that CDOT recently applied for, we were asked in the middle of the month, just after we had a NATA meeting, if we could provide a letter of support, and because it's on our list, we could. And so those kinds of things are helpful. And we'll take a look at that list. We'll bring the list back to you in May for action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. We have the RTD's director's reports. I'm going to just throw out a couple questions, and before we get to that, I'm going to switch it and just acknowledge and thank Deborah Johnson for her response to our letter last month. We appreciate getting that response back and the items that were in there. And I know that we have now seen a newsletter that came out recently. I think some of us might have missed it because we didn't know we were getting it, but we did discuss that at the retreat actually last week. And so we just appreciate, Deborah, your response to us. And I see you're on the meeting, and I appreciate that you're on these meetings each month.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I appreciate your comments and look forward, as I said before, working cooperatively and collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, looks like I see Vince up.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Vince Busick, RTD District J. A lot of things going on at RTD. I guess one of the things that I'm more involved in lately is the General Manager Oversight and Performance Management Committee, of which I am the chair at RTD. This is a committee that works on our strategic planning agenda and performance evaluation of our general manager and CEO. And this year, with the assistance of Deborah Johnson, we've really turned things around. I think we used to have quite a unusual process of strategic planning from my perspective. And often what we came out of it with were activity-based performance metrics instead of outcome-based performance metrics. So along with General Manager CEO Johnson, we've retained the services of a nationally recognized facilitator called TransPro Consulting that does this kind of work exclusively. We're working towards setting up a strategic plan and a board retreat that will put some really good measurable goals in place and identify the outcomes and define success. So that's been kind of time consuming and interesting as well. So that's all I have at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, Vince. And I see Director Cook is on the line as well.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I don't have much to add to Vince's good recap. I agree with what he has said in terms of taking a new approach and really being glad for it. And Deborah's on the line, but one thing I would note is that we've got a study session on Tuesday, the 27th, and Deborah will be launching with us her Road to Recovery effort. And I think the intent, as I understand it, that day is mainly to orient the board to that process. But I'm really looking forward to this more comprehensive effort to look at how we bring riders back, what our approach is to service restoration, et cetera. So I would note that. From a District L standpoint, I did want to let everybody know that Arvada is starting the process of looking at a license, I think, with a TNC to allow e-bikes and scooters in the city, and just starting the public outreach. That looks like it's going to be a subject of a lot of discussion. So I'll be looking to other communities who have done similar things to see what kinds of measures they've adopted as they've done this that have helped to assuage any public concern, because I think it'll be a really important effort to help with first and last mile issues in particular. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any of the other directors on the line. Does anyone have questions? I don't see any hands up, but I have a couple questions actually. The first one is I've been keeping track of just the emails that come through on the rider alerts, and we did have one question that came up about what constitutes a trip. Is it one train going back and forth along the from N line to East Lake all the way down to Union and back, or is it one direction?
This is Deborah Johnson. That would be a round trip.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then the other question I had, and we just heard about this recently, was that there was, I think, an MOU being signed with RTD, CDOT, and I guess the governor's office about Front Range Rail. Is that something that's happening? And if so, how can we make sure that this group is apprised of any of those updates or part of that stakeholder conversation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the question. Some time ago, back in February, when I had the opportunity, along with a member of my staff, being Bill Van Meter, we had a conversation with the chair and vice chair of Southwest Chief and Front Rail Passenger Rail Commission. And in light of the discussions that had been ensuing around Northwest Rail, recognizing that I was new to the area and I'm learning all the history. And when I talked about working collaboratively and cooperatively, I said, to ensure that people don't just think this is rhetoric, it may be opportune for us to have some kind of, letter of intent or agreement saying that we will work cooperatively. And so that conversation ensued in February. And since then, we had discussions with the board around that. Then a meeting had taken place that the governor had convened that included members of CDOT as well as RTD, being Bill Van Meter and myself, and the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission, and also BNSF was in attendance. And so we talked about what we could do collaboratively. So there is a draft. Nothing has been signed at this point. Actually, I was going to send an email to my board with the draft document at 9:30 because the commission's going to share a draft with their commission as well. And so the intent would be for all bodies to look at that. It just basically states the intent that we will be working and collaborating. And so nothing would be effectuated from my perspective relative to me conferring with my policy body. We would not bring that forward until June because there needs to be discussion. So that's where we are. There's nothing that's been, effectuated at this juncture or executed. Thanks.
Thank you. And any questions about that from anyone? I think it's good that there's some movement, but I also am a little bit concerned that on this side of the state, this part of I-25 corridor along the end line, that we may not be a part of those conversations, which then affects, we've all seen the alignment choices and knowing that it's happening on that side rather than on this side, especially with the MOU. And Deborah, I'm not putting this all on you at all. So anyone from CDOT can speak to this as well if they have any information, but we're always concerned that we're not ever going to see that end line finished. And then with now possibly the conversation shifting over to the west side of town, we all wonder how that impacts our side of the road. And I know on this NATA group that we do have members that are kind of spread out all across that corridor. So we definitely have an interest. So I hope CDOT and RTD just keep us in the loop on that conversation as it moves forward. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I might also say that the Transportation Commission hasn't seen that MOU either. We had a quick briefing at last week's meeting that the MOU was more of an operational document about how all those agencies would work together. But I'd like to see that for the Transportation Commission as well, to know what the MOU between all those agencies are. But I haven't seen it either. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. All right, looks like we're moving on to the RTD Accountability Committee update with Councilmember Mullica.
All right, well, thank you so much. So I have a couple updates for this group today. So as you know, there are 3 subcommittees in the RTD Accountability Committee that have been doing some work. So report out from the Finance Subcommittee. So they're working towards formulating recommendations on the unfinished fast tracks corridors with a focus on the Northwest Rail. That's been definitely a main part of their conversations the past couple of meetings. Also working on finalizing a recommendation on the financial measures to include in a dashboard recommendation. That's the dashboard has been some work that both finance and operations subcommittees have focused a lot on, really just trying to increase transparency and allowing the public to have, more information about what's going on at RTD. There's lots of elements included in that proposal. The operations subcommittee, again, is working on system performance measures for the dashboard recommendation and is drafting recommendations for streamlining fare and pass programs. And that recommendation was discussed yesterday at their meeting. So, is there a way to look at a family pass program? Is there a way to expand and just standardize the fare and pass programs overall? The governance subcommittee, we're finalizing the partnership recommendations that we have, and just a brief overview of those partnership recommendations. Essentially, what the recommendation is for RTD to leverage existing and new partnerships to improve service efficiency and grow ridership overall. So emphasize working with local governments, anchor institutions, and TMOs as well as employment centers to really help solve those unique, local mobility needs. Also incentivize communities to enter in cost sharing agreements. I think that's an important thing as we continue to figure out how we're going to pay for some of these transportation options we need. We're also recommending that they explore opportunities to provide cost-effective and local transit services through collaboration with existing mobility services. So think via Uber, Lyft, how can we really think of innovative relationships that we could get with these organizations to meet those gaps and reduce costs. And one of the most exciting things is we really would like RTD to consider developing a competitive innovation grant that helps drive bold ideas and increase ridership. So if there's a local community that wants to try something new, is there money set aside to help kind of uplift some of these new programs, try, a new pilot of something. I think it's really important that we, continue to have new ideas brought and new solutions brought to meet local needs. So other things going on in the governance subcommittee, we've been focusing on RTD's service boundary, and our recommendations are mainly going to be for the Reimagine RTD that's kind of regrouped and reformed. I know that they're having a large conversation on service boundaries, and so our recommendations are going to be focusing on, how do we add to their scope for this conversation. So those aren't drafted yet. It's something that we're still working on. And then what's important is that time's running out, I think is what, there's just like a lot of pressure as we're getting towards the end of this process of the RTD accountability meeting. So RTD subcommittees have 2 meetings left, actually. So we're ending May 19th. That's because we want to make sure that we have time to really gather those recommendations, finalize them, have them drafted, and then by June 14th, so that we can start a public comment period and a public hearing on the recommendations. And so the final report would be voted on in a special committee on June 28th, and then transmitted to the stakeholders by the July 1st deadline. So the years passed very quickly. And so I think that has been one of the challenging things about this process is when you look at the large scope that was granted to the RTD Accountability Committee at the very beginning, it was like, what work can we get done that is meaningful, but yet, we don't have the ability to really go into the weeds on a lot of these recommendations. And so they are more high level, I think probably a little more high level than what people wanted or expected in some of the recommendations. So for example, with the Service Council recommendation, there's a lot of communities that wanted the RTD Accountability Committee to really hone in on, are they going to be county-based or travel shed-based councils, and what is the cost sharing in that? And honestly, it was just too much, I think, with the limited time frame that we have and the number of topics that members wanted to address. So time is an issue. The only other update that I have is that we did send a letter to Senator Winter and Representative Gray, just requesting additional funding specifically for transit and other multimodal transportation options in their transportation funding proposal. So which we've been talking about for, I don't know, since December, really. Overall, Colorado contributes significantly less money to its transit agencies in other states. And so we as an accountability committee wanted to just voice that that's something that Colorado does need to address. One of the biggest issues that, as we're talking about transit, the importance of RTD and ridership in our region, it does come down, money's a big factor, right? How are we going to be able to support and make sure that RTD continues to stay healthy and viable? So those are some of the recommendations that we've been working on. And I know that we had a conversation at our SPC meeting last Friday about just re-highlighting the Service Council conversation and those recommendations that came out from the RTD Accountability Committee. The Service Councils are an opportunity for more of a local input to be provided, and not just from elected officials. And I think that's important to emphasize that, the purpose is really to get, transit writers on this group to provide input, local electeds, other people who are really just invested in the transit system and how it operates, and identifying those needs and gaps. So as those recommendations go to RTD and are processed, hopefully there'll be a group that is formed to really evaluate the Service Council recommendation and how to move forward with that. And I think it's really important that NATA folks from this group are part of that process to make sure that, our voice continues to be at the table when it comes to, really creating what these Service Councils could possibly look like. So that is it for me. If anybody has any questions, let me know. But it's been an interesting, wild ride for the past year, with lots of great conversations and lots of just, great ideas, I think, that people have discussed, and really just, we want transit, we want RTD to be successful, we want RTD to increase ridership. I think all of us are on that same page. And so how can we work together to make that happen? That's all I got.
Thank you, Julie. Lots of information. And so I guess we'll have one more update from you before that goes to public hearing, it sounds like, in May.
Yeah, so the final report is going to be aggregated on June 14th. So I could report out at the June meeting as well. So yeah, although we should make sure that these recommendations get sent out to the group prior, in case there is like public comment and stuff like that. It looks like it's going to be, just want people to be aware, and then they can participate in the public comment period as it comes.
Okay, maybe we can get that out in an email or something if
Yeah.
we need to get it earlier. Perfect.
Yeah, as soon as I get it, I'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on, we have some highlights of Broomfield Safer Streets Project Awards.
Great, thank you. Good morning, I'm Sarah Grant, Transportation Manager with the City and County of Broomfield, and thank you for the opportunity to provide a quick thumbnail of some of the projects that we applied for to the Safer Main Streets Initiative. First slide, please. So just as a quick reminder that this program was developed by CDOT and DRCOG to support infrastructure projects that improve safety and accessibility along our urban arterials in the Denver metro area. In particular, a focus on vulnerable road users such as pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, transit users, the elderly, and those with disabilities. And this project was really born out of alignment out of the DRCOG Vision Zero, taking action on Vision Zero, as well as CDOT safety. So it's really great to see putting funding behind these priorities. Next slide, please. The first project I'd like to talk about, Broomfield was actually very successful with 3 projects for this grant application. So the first project that we applied for was the US 287 120th Avenue side path infill and transit access improvements. And this is a part of the Northwest Area Mobility Study as a potential BRT corridor, and it provides connectivity between 2 regional access stations, the US 36 and Broomfield Station and Wagon Road Park and Ride to the east. Currently, we have a project we're working on between Teller and Quay, which is just west of Main Street. But this entire project is really focusing on basically east of the new 120th Avenue connection to Vrain Street, which is near Walmart. And in this segment, this is a part of the high injury network of DRCOG, as well as identified as a critical corridor. In the last 5 years, there have been 2 fatal pedestrian collisions, 1 severely injured cyclist, and a total of 10 fatal or severe injury crashes in this project area. And in total, over 350 property damage crashes as well have occurred. And our local data indicates that there have been a total of 8 vulnerable road users involved in collisions in the last 5 years. So next slide, please. Here's a few photos of the vicinity. Some of you may be familiar with it. There's a photo here east of Greenway Avenue, as well as there's a 120th Avenue frontage road that also lacks facilities on the south side. So we aim to create connectivity by doing side path infill and access improvements to the transit access along this corridor. Next slide, please. So essentially we will fill in those gaps. We also aim to improve ADA access at intersections where they're needed and driveways. There's an example here of a absolutely terrible driveway for access, and make those improvements along the entirety of the corridor as proposed. And I'd also like to point out that in addition to the priorities that have been laid out by Dr. Cog as a critical corridor, this corridor was actually also identified in our 2019 Broomfield Bicycle and Pedestrian Assessment as a top priority corridor. So it is really great to see the alignment between the regional priorities and our local priorities, and being able to leverage state funding to complete this. Next slide, please. Another project that we applied for is 112th Avenue, Uptown Avenue, complete streets and railroad safety improvements. This is an image of kind of the overall vicinity of the location. The project will be between Parkland Street or Wadsworth Boulevard and Reed Way, which is just west of Main Street and Westminster Boulevard. This area kind of straddles Broomfield and Westminster and provides connectivity across some barriers, including the US 36 highway itself, the BNSF railway, and provides access to regional facilities, including the US 36 and Broomfield Station, the US 36 bikeway, and also the Big Dry Creek. Access is not too far from the eastern terminus of this project area. Next slide, please. And here's a bit of a zoom in of that location, so you can see a little bit more closely here, the US 36 highway and bikeway to the west of the project area, and the BNSF railroad. And that is the project area that we're looking at, and is a part of the high injury network. In the last 5 years, there have been 26 collisions, 5 serious injuries, including vulnerable road users. And there actually has been 1 fatality here. Next slide, please. And so here's an image of the corridor as it is today. And as you can see, it lacks pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And currently we have a project to improve some railroad safety, but with the ultimate condition that is anticipated here with a 4-lane configuration with turn lanes, we will have the ultimate configuration of the quiet zone in this location. And we do plan to make the pedestrian improvements in the Broomfield right-of-way, and also make a new connection to the US 36 bikeway as well. We were initially awarded a partial award for this project, and we were very grateful for the opportunity for Dr. Cog and CDOT to allow a second opportunity to provide additional information. And we were able to fully fund our project intent in this location. Next slide, please. And here's just another image of the location. Again, no pedestrian facilities leading up to the bridge over US 36. And there's also a school in the project vicinity, Jefferson Academy at Reedway, 112th Avenue. And this is an image of the bike racks on day 1, or actually the first week of school before COVID. So as you can see, very full. Even being a charter school, there are children traveling some distances to get to this school by bike. And I believe that's my last slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so my last slide for that. And the last project, we also received funding for a trail connection from Colorado 128 to the US 36 bikeway. That is a photo of the project vicinity. It is essentially the northwest corner of US 36 and Colorado 128. And it will create a 12-foot path connection. And this award is for construction, connecting 2 CDOT facilities actually through CDOT property. Next slide. And this is the final slide. And this is just kind of an aerial image of the connectivity. And so essentially this project will be providing a mirror access for the westbound Colorado 128 cycling facilities down to the bikeway. As you can see towards the bottom of the page, there is an eastbound path connection for Colorado 128. So it'll provide a more convenient and safer access in this location. I will note that this new connection, Colorado 128 and the 120th Avenue connection, is very new. And so it did not show up on the high injury network, but all of the corridors leading up to this project vicinity and around it are a part of the high injury network. Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to present some of the projects that we recently applied for. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It's always good to see some of the successes.
Thank you.
Okay. Malcolm has his hand up, it looks like.
Just wanted to say thanks for the great work you're doing in Broomfield to improve safety. And also I appreciate your virtual background that reflects the collaborative relationship that Erie and Broomfield have. We've got rainbows that start in one community and end in the other.
Indeed. Thank you, Malcolm.
All right. Next up on the agenda is the presentation from CDPHE on the employer trip reduction program. I know this is something that we're all trying to understand, and we'll go ahead and listen in as Clay, I believe, is presenting.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you all for this opportunity to talk to you all this morning about the Employee Traffic Reduction Program, or E-TRIP. And so my name is Clay Clark. I'm the supervisor of the Climate Change Unit within the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And I think at this point, my staff has given this presentation, I believe about a dozen times now, to sort of larger audiences with opportunity for question and answer. I think we've done over sort of 20 meetings like this one with various chambers and business groups. So I think there is, I don't want to assume this, I think there is some at least sort of conceptual understanding of what the E-TRIP entails. So what I would really like to do, because again, this is sort of the presentation that has been given a number of times, I'll move through the presentation fairly quickly. If there's any questions at the end, we could go back to a slide. I'd also invite, staff just did one of these larger question and answer sessions with a presentation on this last night, and there's another one on the 28th. So if you're wanting to see this presentation with more detail on each of these slides that I'll be going through, I would invite you to attend that as well. Let me just say, I'll walk through this. I'll give an overview of sort of what the program is, and I'll start with some of sort of how the program, as far as what's being considered, sort of how it originated, and then sort of where we are in the process now, and then sort of the details of the program, and then what that would look like as far as it's being conceptualized for consideration by the Air Quality Control Commission. So can we move on to the first slide, please? So I think, as probably everyone knows, transportation is a contributor to both ozone and greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, the Front Range has struggled with ozone non-attainment for a number of years now. And so while the E-TRIP is called out as a near-term strategy to be looked at by the Air Commission in the recently completed greenhouse gas reduction roadmap that was just completed earlier this year, well, in January of this year. And E-TRIP has actually, or a program such as this has been looked at for a while now. The RAC, or Regional Air Quality Council, has been looking at this as an ozone strategy. And actually, the Federal Clean Air Act calls out TDM, or transportation demand measures, as a strategy to address ozone, as particular as the sort of federal standards ratchet down as an area struggles to become in attainment. And so this would be something that really is intended to be twofold, both as an ozone strategy as well as a greenhouse gas reduction strategy. Next slide, please. So as far as the rulemaking process that's being considered before the Air Quality Control Commission, the request for hearing would be in May, and then if the Air Commission decides to take that up, that would be a rulemaking hearing in August. And it's sort of in the process now. As I mentioned, we've done a number of meetings like this and significant stakeholder and engagement. And of course, we're continuing to take input on the development of this regulation, along with other regulations that are sort of a suite of transportation regulations that would be before the Air Commission in August. But just to go through that that timeline again here. So specifically, that would be a May request, a May 20th request for hearing, and then as you see there on the last bullet there, that would be an August 19th through 20th rulemaking, potentially even a little bit longer, given, like I say, there's a suite of regulatory options that will be considered in that rulemaking. So that would be pretty ambitious to get through that in 2 days. We'll have to see how the commission decides to sort of take that on as far as the consideration of these regulations. Next slide, please. So next, I'll provide just a broad overview of the program. First, I'd want to reiterate that this E-Trip proposal is not really a novel concept. There's a number of jurisdictions that have successfully implemented E-Trip, both at the state level, Washington, Oregon, Massachusetts, New Jersey, as well as at the county and then some town and city levels as well. But as we're considering it at this point, as far as sort of the parameters of the program as it's been developed, it would require large employers, those employers with over 100 employees coming to a single work site, to develop a plan that would provide options or incentives for their employees to get to work other than just the single occupancy vehicle. And so that's really sort of at the highest level what the program would entail. Next slide. So just to be clear what it's not, again, it's intended to create options for employees. It's not intended in any way to be a ban on commuting to perform work duties or any other type of driving of an individual's vehicle. It's really about helping us rethink commuting options, really that could be beneficial to everyone. Next slide. So some of the provisions that would be required under the E-Trip plan. So there would be a point person, which is the ETC or Employee Transportation Coordinator, that each employer would name as their point of contact with the state. I think at this point, as the rule is being conceptualized, that wouldn't necessarily need to be somebody in-house. If an employer wanted to utilize someone in-house, they could also utilize an outside entity or a consultant to do that as well. The business or organization would have to come up with a plan that sets out how they're going to achieve the reduction goals that are set out under the requirements. And then essentially there would be a baseline survey, and then that survey information would be provided to the state. And then the employer would implement their plan and then report back on progress towards each year. There would be an annual reporting requirement that would be reported back to the state. And the time frame for, at least as that's being, it's at this point for the way it's structured, you can see the timeline there. So essentially sort of coming up with the designation of that point person and an initial plan sort of mid-2022, with then reporting back on how the program is working by mid-2023. Next slide, please. And so again, just some of the options that would be considered. Again, this isn't intended to be an exhaustive list, but of course, some of the sort of silver lining coming out of COVID, obviously, is there's a greater proof of concept when it comes to working at home or telecommuting. I think we certainly would want to build upon that, but also for those essential workers or workers that need to be at the work site, there's a number of options as well there. So you can see that would range from anything from flexible or compressed work schedules to use of public transit, even supporting bikes through bike lockers and showers at the work site. Next slide, please. Just highlighting some of the successes with similar programs. You can see the first three here are our voluntary program with Colorado with Way to Go, where there's been a great deal of success already. Again, these are the kind of successes we'd like to try to utilize across the non-attainment area. Again, as an example of a success in an area where there's a mandatory program. You see at the bottom there's Seattle Children's Hospital, and that, as I mentioned, Washington has a E-Trip program, and again, this was a successful program that was utilized with a number of essential workers. And while it's not on this slide, I would point out also, Vail Health has a very similar program that's been extremely successful, where they shuttle workers from places such as Leadville and other areas, and that's actually pointed to as being one of the more successful programs in the country. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of the E-Trip program. So beyond just the air quality and GHG reduction benefits, of course, there's the traffic reduction benefit in certain areas, of course, as well. But also, while there can be sort of an initial cost to implement a program like this, there can also be a great opportunity for net savings as well. You think about, for an employer that can reduce overhead costs when it comes to office space, paying for parking space or employee parking and building parking garages. All these kind of things could be cost savings for the employer. And then, of course, on the employee side, it's this greater flexibility and options in getting to work, but also just consider savings on fuel costs and vehicle maintenance. So again, there's a lot of opportunity for net savings here. And finally, I mentioned, there's these ongoing stakeholder meetings, and so I'd invite you. There's the website here. There's some other information again on all the transportation programs that are being developed. We've got one that we're developing in combination with CDOT. This one, of course, was developed in combination with the RAC. There's a mobile source program that the CDPHE has as well, that's looking at enhancement to the vehicle inspection programs in those areas where there's vehicle inspection. So again, I would invite, if you're interested in the sort of broader package there, to visit this website. And so I will end with that. Again, if there's any specific questions on any of those slides, I'm happy to go back, but if we can, I'm happy to jump into question and answer. Or if there's just feedback as well, of course, if there's just general comments or any feedback or comments that folks might certainly be interested in that as well.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and open it up. Any questions or comments, feedback? I'm sure a lot of people on this call have seen this presentation a few times now. I'll just scroll through here.
Yeah, and between looking at the screen, and if you've got specific questions you would like to read out so the whole group could hear it, that might be easier for everybody.
Let's see here. Looks like Anita has a couple questions. Or was that from a different?
Nope, it's from the same chain.
Okay.
Thank you, Clay, for this presentation, and I appreciate that you have given it a lot of times. As someone who is the former president of Colorado Community for Climate Action, I'm a pretty big climate advocate. I really applaud the goal of this and looking at transportation and the impact of commuting on emissions and looking at ways to reduce that impact. I do have a couple of concerns, and I apologize if I kind of missed the meat of this in your presentation. But my concern is that this ends up rewarding and maybe even incentivizing economic development in areas that have received a disproportionate amount of funding, either for transit or for multimodal options. And so when you have a great bike network or access to train, and we're going to figure out a way to kind of penalize or kind of require that of employers, how do you prevent economic investment going that direction rather than communities that have already been left behind by that type of investment. So I'm really worried about communities that need access to opportunity, this somehow creating an additional barrier for that. And so that, is there a way to make sure, I know you said this isn't one size fits all, but making sure that we're really structuring it in a way that does not leave these communities behind. Communities that I might add are additionally vulnerable to the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And obviously I'd be interested in your input on the solution to that as well, because that certainly is something that we've sort of considered from lots of angles as well. And you're right, do you set sort of, does the state set sort of a floor that then applies across the whole non-attainment area, where that means that sort of there needs to be sort of employers in areas that maybe need to do maybe more, and there's kind of a stretch, but if you do that, and if it's sort of this consistent goal across, then maybe there's areas that could do more where there wouldn't be as much as you're pointing out, because there's already these sort of resources and things in place, and so I think the way that we've structured in the way that sort of modeled upon what the RAC developed does have this sort of a reduction goal across the entire area. I think one thing that we're certainly open to considering is an overall reduction goal across the area, but maybe within the area there could be some sort of tiered or different approach. And I think that might, as far as the way you could drive what you're talking about through this particular regulatory measure, I think that's the sort of the mechanism or the lever I would see here. Again, I think this all, it plays into some of the broader considerations around land use planning and these things that I think are a little bit beyond the Air Commission. At the same time, one of the other rules that's being considered is this GHG budget rule that it would apply to transportation planning. And again, I think a piece of that, at least the way that's envisioned, is that there would be sort of ways through these sort of alternative measures that the MPOs could help fund or do that would sort of build out some of these these infrastructure things that you're talking about that are lacking. So again, I think all these sort of need to work in place, but that sort of big picture in those questions about how we do drive that in sort of an equitable way, but where we're like saying we're not leaving these communities behind, it's a very good question. And again, if you've got solutions or any suggestions, I'm certainly interested to hear that as well.
I wish I had a silver bullet for all of these questions, but I unfortunately don't. I mean, I will just say even the kind of poster child, like explaining Vail's shuttle service, right? Like recognizing that a lot of their employees lived in, I think you said, in another community, and then shuttling them there. They almost benefit like from an employee concentration in one town, which is actually a byproduct of unaffordable housing within their community, right? But not every employer is going to have a circumstance that has that concentrated of a population, and which almost allows an easier focused solution. And so I think the challenge that you're going to have is recognizing that every employer's employee base is different. Their transportation needs are different. We don't want to have, I want you to be successful in this endeavor, and I don't want it to be a talking point in the future about the unintended consequences of this type of interaction with the business community. So I'm just asking for caution and an eye towards equity.
Great, I appreciate those comments.
And Councilmember Mullica.
Yeah, thanks. So kind of going off of the conversation that Anita started, and then I saw that Malcolm's comment in the chat. I think one of the questions that I have is there any additional funding for transit that's going to be planned to help support communities that do need better access to transit, to be able to access them and be able to get to their jobs as their employers implement these plans? How are we going to help those communities who don't already have enough transit access?
Right. I think it is a good question. It's certainly a question we've heard before. I think one of the the ideas. And really one of the reasons for starting with the non-attainment area beyond the sort of the ozone piece of it was also that there's a number of TMAs, and there are a lot of turnkey solutions that would be available and resources available to employers. But you're right. I mean, that's going to take resources to do that. And again, I can't speak for CDOT, but as I understand it, the legislative package that's moving through with transportation now would have some funding for TMAs and other support that would be able to provide resources to employers on this front.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I do see Malcolm's comments in there. He just shares the same concerns. And then, like we have in this meeting pretty frequently, if transit's not convenient, reliable, and affordable, nobody's going to use it. And so putting this on businesses when they're already struggling to come back from the pandemic without any real funding or resources, I think a lot of questions around, is it going to be a carrot or a stick? So incentivizing or penalizing. And so for those of us who don't have an option at all, it's always going to be a penalty. And I think that's where we're all very cautious about how that's going to look moving forward. So it looks like I think we're all pretty engaged and wondering what this is really going to look like. So I know you've got a few more meetings for stakeholder input. So I guess we'll look forward to hearing what the overall consensus was and how this might work, because I think we all agree we want there to be less congestion, definitely helping with greenhouse gases and the environmental, but not at the detriment of our businesses and especially for those of us who don't have access.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate those concerns, and those, obviously we've heard that on a number of occasions, and so we certainly are sensitive to that, and and I think that message will probably be brought to the commission from on a number of fronts before the rulemaking. So I think that will certainly be considered as part of this rulemaking.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation today. You must have it memorized now.
Well, like it's typically been staff that's done this, and so I will have to say that Tim Taylor, who typically does a much more eloquent job. I was, like I say, since it's been done so many times, I thought it would be more helpful if I just kind of came and ran through it and answered questions. So I appreciate the feedback. I mean, this has been beneficial for me as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Clay. All right, we have our last item on the agenda, which is a legislative update from Megan McKillop. And then I believe we also have Andy wanted to participate in that conversation with some updates.
I think Andy's willing to answer questions as well. He's our CDOT legislative liaison, and so he's on today too. And if there's questions specific for CDOT, he's happy to chime in.
Perfect. All right, Megan, it's all you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a ton to discuss with you, just a couple updates, and then mainly I'll give an update about transportation funding. Quickly, the House Transportation Committee met on Tuesday regarding House Bill 1252, and this is the bill that would allow Parker to leave RTD. Essentially, that bill was postponed indefinitely, so it did not pass out of committee. And I'm not sure that there's going to be another effort going forward, but just to update you all, Parker will not be leaving RTD this year at least. I also wanted to update you on the Front Range rail line legislation that was introduced recently. That is Senate Bill 238. And this bill, brought forward by President Garcia, creates the Front Range Passenger Rail District for the purpose of planning, designing, developing, financing, constructing, operating, and maintaining an interconnected passenger rail system along the Front Range. And that district would include Denver and Broomfield, along with all areas from Wyoming to New Mexico that lie within that Front Range area. So essentially this bill, CML has taken a neutral position on the bill, mainly because it's not a statewide issue, although it's very important, especially for you all. Each municipality in the district would have to vote to approve a sales tax in order to fund the district. Additionally, there's an option for additional district that is closer to the station. So it would be a station planning district. And the municipalities within those districts would also be able to vote to approve an additional sales tax to maintain these stations along the Front Range rail line. And to clarify, I'm sorry, those are station improvement districts. So again, all of the sales taxes would have to be approved by each city within the district. There's no general fund money that is going to the funding of this idea. The bill also talks about partnerships with Amtrak, and I think that is in anticipation of some federal funding to Amtrak to create commuter systems such as this one. Again, we're taking a neutral position, but we're following it very closely, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that you may have before I get to transportation funding.
Any questions on that? I don't see any.
All right. So just briefly, we've had an update from the governor's office regarding the transportation funding bill, which we're still awaiting a draft of. So we still haven't seen actual bill language, but it's starting to become a more fully formed idea. After some stakeholding and negotiating, the governor's office has made some changes to the fee structure. They're very subtle changes, however. So one major change that is being discussed is the road usage fee, or what we would call the gas tax. That will still be indexed with inflation. But instead of in the initial proposal, the fee was supposed to be raised 2 cents every 2 years. It's now being discussed to instead raise that fee 1 cent every year instead of that 2 years, but would still hit that 8-cent cap after 8 years. So it's just a subtly larger increase over those 8 years to provide more funding upfront, I believe. There's also discussions about the diesel fee and making that more in line with the road usage fee to help the ag community there who pays a lot for diesel. So they wanted to make sure that they're not paying too much into it right off the bat. So that will just mirror the road usage fee. There's also discussion of slightly decreasing the electric vehicle registration fee increases. Those numbers are not yet solid, but that is to help, electric vehicles also use the road, but should they shoulder such a, cost, I think that's something that's just kind of being negotiated and discussed. So just some subtle changes in those fee structures. But the distribution of all of the fees is going to remain the same. And that's what's the most important for our purposes at CML. That existing highway users tax fund distribution is going to remain at 60 to the state, 22% to the counties, and 18% to municipalities. And I do believe that this bill will generate a ton of revenue for the HUTF, and municipalities will see great benefit to that. I wanted to quickly touch on one thing. Councilmember Mullica had mentioned a request to have more funding go to multimodal options and funding for mass transit. There is discussion about the multimodal option fund that's laid out in the proposal. There is, I believe that there will be a bigger percentage that will go to local governments and local districts to distribute the money that comes into the multimodal option fund. The numbers are not yet set in stone, but I think, so right now I believe it's a 60-40 split, where 60% of the money goes to local governments and 40% of that money would go to the state. And they're just looking to increase that share to local governments. But again, it's not been determined how that will happen. And that's really all the update I have for you right now. CML is going, I believe as of right now, we have our board meeting tomorrow, but we are planning to support the transportation funding bill when it is introduced. Just, because for many reasons, but, and I can answer any questions for you. Anyone who has questions, I can answer them. Sorry.
Thanks, Megan. I think we're all still waiting to see the actual bill language so we can figure out what it looks like. We've heard
Yes,
every meeting, it's been 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So is it another 2 weeks?
I actually am not sure on, I don't want to keep saying it'll be another 2 weeks or it'll be this week. But I think time's running out, right? So it has to come, it has to come soon. But it sounds like to me from the conversations I've had that this is pretty fully thought out, and they just need to put ink to paper, and this will be the closest to what we will see.
Thanks. I see Phil has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, really quick, back to the idea of the Front Range Passenger Rail district. I'm just confused about the idea that some municipalities are in control of the taxation. It's not the board that's being set up. I just have some confusion with that statement and trying to figure out, so if the majority of municipalities votes for a tax, the whole district gets taxed. How does that work?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I believe that the district can assess a percentage of sales tax. However, it's subject to voter approval by each city within the district. So if Broomfield, for instance, doesn't approve that sales tax in order to fund the rail line district, then they won't increase their sales tax. And that's really all the information I have in that regard. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Let's maybe we can have Andy jump in here as well, and then Ron Papsdorf has a comment in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Andy?
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yay, I'm so glad Andy's here to be a lifeline.
No worries. I'm trying to multitask here and get my video working as well. So while I'm talking, I'll be working on that. But yeah, so the rail district is an interesting new entity. If the bill passes, as Megan said, there will be around 12 counties and their municipalities, either entirely or partially included in a district. And then upon passage, it would create the new rail district board, which would be 14-member board, 6 from the governor's appointment, and then other 8 from the MPOs in the new district area. I believe it is Dr. Cog, and I think North Front Range would have 2 board members, and then all the other MPOs or TPRs would have 1. Based upon that, once it was created, then they would have the authority to, I believe, as drafted, they would have the authority to place a ballot measure on your ballots. And then, as Megan said, it's entirely unclear. Does that mean that 50+1 of the entire eligible voters, if they approve the bill, or if they approve the sales tax increase, then all the district would have a sales tax increase, even those, that maybe didn't want it. So that's an uncertainty. There's also an uncertainty in regards to the stadium improvement districts about how those would be formed. There's additional authority for the rail district board to create enterprises in addition to the stadium improvement district and whatnot. We're not sure what those enterprises would be used for, but there's language in the bill allowing for that right now. So there's still uncertainty as far as how the funding mechanism for the future rail would happen. The bill does allow the district to leverage sales tax as well as a lodging tax.
Thank you, Andy. I think it's still very unclear, as it sounds, how this is actually going to work. So any questions for Andy? And I do
Ron
see
had
that
a-
Ron typed in, yeah. So Ron, do you want to just speak to that real quick?
No, not really. Just because that as Andy and Megan said, there's a lot of uncertainty. I have not read the bill page by page yet. So, but have at least been briefed on some elements of it. I thought that the voting once, if the legislature passes the bill that creates the district boundary, then the district board would have the option of referring tax questions to the voters. And my understanding, it was structured, it would go to the voters, not to sort of jurisdiction by jurisdiction. But I think there may also be some flexibility to kind of have different geographies established within the broad district boundaries, recognizing the fact that if Front Range Passenger Rail proceeds, it probably will not go from end to end all in one fell swoop. It'll probably be phased in. So, and so I've exhausted all my knowledge except for the fact that DRCOG under the draft bill, under the bill as introduced, would get 3 seats on the board, not 2.
Okay. Great.
And Madam Chair, I just would add that this will be something I think will have to be determined by, the county clerks and municipal clerks to figure out how those elections will take place, and in coordination with how the board decides to levy the sales tax. So there's, again, as we've all said, there's a lot of uncertainty going forward. But again, we'll monitor this very closely, and I'll give update next month.
Thank you, Megan. Perfect. So any other questions before we wrap it up? Obviously, we all have questions about the transportation bill, but we'll just have to keep waiting.
And Madam Chair, forgive me for jumping in. Again, it's Andy with CDOT, and I can't figure out my camera, so my apologies. But I did want to say that the draft language has been on our side finalized, and there was a lid put on it at 7 a.m. this morning. So that draft language should be coming out to stakeholders, hopefully within the week.
All right. I know we'll all be looking forward to that. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Questions, comments? I see none. I see nobody waving hands in the air. So I'm sure we'll be discussing pretty much the same topic next month. I know we'll be looking forward to Julie's update. And then also, hopefully we'll actually have the transportation bill language. Okay, well, the next meeting, I believe, is May 27th. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone there. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.